therapy does tend to be more past focused. Coaching is like present focused. Therapists, some of them do clinical work, and they are trained to know to spot it when to farm it. You know, there are, again, clinical therapists that work in different settings, but I would say probably the large majority of them are working in counseling with like people that are trying to function in their life. And this is where the disambiguation of coaching and therapy comes in. Therapists are diagnostic as well. So they can diagnose you as having general anxiety disorder. They can run that through insurance. But the fuzzy part of it is they're listening really well. They're asking good questions. So in that sense, it's not much different.
Right put.
Hey.
Welcome to Tech Scenes.
Good to be here. Yeah.
Tell me about evolution. How'd you guys get started?
Yeah, it really started somewhat opportunistically as a lifestyle business. You know, coaching didn't really exist in the marketplace, I don't know, even 20 years ago, right? I mean, a little bit, and it really, kind of came into play because especially a lot of founders and folks in startups are dealing with these like intense, complex situations. Right. And having somebody that understands organizational dynamics but also has a skill set of being able to like help somebody knife through that, the personal stuff and the business stuff and the relationships and all those different kind of people started realizing it was a real thing. And so I worked at a big Fortune 500 company and had a really cool job running the culture function. It was like leading workshops and trainings and doing internal comms, and it was great because I got to kind of see how at that level of scale culture could be a really powerful mechanism. But I burned out. Like had a global beat, and I was like, classic kind of flame out, and
Right.
And my co-founder was part of, Jeff was part of the Yahoo Mafia in the mid-aughts. There's a lot of great talent there. Jeff Weiner was there, and Ali Diab, and Jen Bilski, and so he got a coach there for the first time, and was kind of blown away by how helpful it was for him as a leader.
Right.
And so he started one more company. I think it was one more company, and then he went and worked for a coaching firm and got bit by the bug. And he tried one more coaching platform that did all right, but then was like, you know what? I just want to do coaching 9 months a year, and he had a couple of young kids, and it's actually a good lifestyle business.
Oh, I'm sure.
But that's unfortunately ours grew like a weed then.
Right. Not a lifestyle business.
Yeah, we became confronted with a lot of the same, things that our clients face around scale and all of those kind of things. So, it started, then I joined him, I left DeVito where I was working, and we built our platform, which is essentially the same platform today. It's a dual-sided platform. Okay. So, I'm happy to share about what that is, right?
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, it's coaching. We do 360s, which are like surveys to assess leadership capabilities.
What kind of surveys? What do you mean 360 with their leadership team? Or?
Yeah, we'll do interviews with the board, with the leadership team across the organization. We'll also have some electronic version where people can kind of answer anonymously. Mm-hmm. And it just gives like a holistic view up, down, to the side, 360 degrees of their strengths and opportunities.
Okay.
And so it's
specifically strengths and opportunities.
Yep.
Not weaknesses.
Oh
threats.
No. Well, we call it. Yeah, I mean, it's not like a SWOT analysis,
right.
But it's the plus and the minus, right? Like, where do you do well? What do you not do well? What do you need to focus on?
Sounds a lot like our annual and quarterly survey with the team as a whole. Mm-hmm. What are we doing great? Where's our challenges? Mm-hmm. Uncovering those challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really important. You have to like have those kind of feedback loops. Otherwise, you start like, there's these blind spots and distortions. And,
right.
And, doing it anonymously is also really helpful because, sometimes people aren't really comfortable. Ideally, they would just say whatever they would say to you doing the survey to the person, but humans don't work that way.
Right.
So we aggregate it, and then you give the person a picture of how they're doing, which is great.
And then is that like just on the launch with them, or do you do that like annually? Or
yeah, well, I think a leader should do it, and there's like the organizational version, but like a leader should do it every couple of years at minimum. I think even annually, and you can do little pulse versions of it where you just do like a quick hit. Have they gotten better or not? You know, thumbs up, thumbs down. But yeah, at least every couple of years. And we do it when we launch coaching because it provides a data set that we can use for what they need to work on.
Right, starting point.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we do that. We do teamwork, offsites, and team development. We do management training, culture work, and strategy alignments. And those things are a platform. And then on the other side, we've built this platform for coaches to come and build their book of business and have community and learn as a community of practice. So it's like a dual-sided platform.
Yep.
That's now powered by AI, which I can talk about too, which I know we've talked about a little bit. But anyway, it just turns out that like at that point in 2015, our sweet spot around venture-backed growth stage companies was somewhat distinctive. And so we started getting a lot of clients based on the fact that we would take our big company knowledge and bring it down after they raised a B-ish C round, sometimes A, and help them know how to process build, organization build, and like craft an organization that allowed them to scale as they were moving out of the phase of just being the person that was building the product to the person that needs an organization and a culture and a way of leading that's fundamentally different.
Right.
So we worked with Slack and Snapchat in 2015, and we kind of scaled. We're the house that Slack built. I mean, our entire arc was, they were our largest and most integrated client. I had a built-in badge on a desk. I mean, we were plugged into Slack in those early days. And through Salesforce, I still think they're a client at Salesforce. I don't work with anybody anymore, but we built their culture, architecture, trained all their managers, coached them one-on-one, built a bunch of their early HR stuff. And it was a great insight, right? To a company that like was a rocket ship in the age of unicorns, right? I don't know that we'll see that again, in venture and startup. It's kind of a unique time. So
yeah, I think this actually with this new wave of vibe coding, I think we're going to see a lot of new companies. Yeah. People are building a lot of new products very quickly. People that didn't have the technical knowledge.
I know.
I think there's going to be another wave of like entrepreneurs coming. If you're looking out at the water, someone that does know how to read the waves. I don't know if you'd ever figure that out coming from, the Midwest yet.
I did, yeah.
But I have friends that can just sit there and be like, oh, here they come. And I'm like, I see nothing.
I know.
But I do think, I think there is a big wave coming. A big wave.
Well, you're seeing it. I think the current wave of AI companies that are blowing up right now, it's like...
Well, we're both doing it.
Right.
We're both building products.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I was waiting to build. I knew what I wanted to build, but I've been waiting. And like any company I've worked with over the past 25 years, it's been like technology meets industry. At a certain time, this technology will unlock something in that industry. And like this technology is unlocking every industry in a unique way, and allowing people that never had software or products to be able to do that very quickly. I still think the building of products in that way is like get you 90% there. There's a lot of 10% left. I think that will be challenging if you don't have the right people, but I'm curious about from your perspective, like what's the difference between like a therapist, a psychologist, and a coach?
Yeah, it's a good and common question. Do you want me to? I'm gonna actually answer between even a psychologist and a therapist.
Yeah.
I'll be like that specific.
Yeah.
Psychologists are trained and they actually have a clinical internship. That's the most heavy duty form that is diagnostic. It's quasi-medical. I don't know if quasi is the right word. It actually is. Many of them are integrated in health systems. They don't prescribe medication. Psychiatrists do. Right. But that's about it. From a skill set standpoint, they deal with the most intense clinical mental health issues and addiction treatment. The DSM book where they actually talk about clinical mental health. Therapists know generally, some of them do clinical work, and they are trained to know to spot it when to farm it. There are, again, clinical therapists that work in different settings, but I would say probably the large majority of them are working in counseling with like people that are trying to function in their life, have a better relationship, or deal with difficult emotions or whatever. And this is where the disambiguation of coaching and therapy comes in. Therapists are diagnostic as well. So they can diagnose you as having general anxiety disorder. They can run that through insurance. But the fuzzy part of it is they're listening really well, they're asking good questions, and especially over the last 30 or 40 years, they're getting the client to answer their own questions and like wrestle with their own issues, right? So in that sense, it's not much different.
Right.
Coaches, therapy does tend to be more past focused. Coaching is like present focused, and a really good coach has the chops to know how to hang and we kind of joke it's like a clinical spike. I mean, there's a moment with a founder where it's like helpful to talk about their family, because many of them are like really trying to do something that is like quite deep, like prove to their dad that they can make it, or deal with their own inadequacy by building this company is so common. And I don't want to ignore that, and I don't need to farm it out, and I need to have that skill.
Right.
But the primary role of a coach is helping a person execute their role. So if we talk about that, I might say like, we're going to do some work on that, and then you need to go to this workshop. We always recommend they have a therapist too, because then I'm going to pivot into talking about, okay, well, I get that you're motivated by this sense of lack and intensity.
Right.
Now let's talk about how that's showing up and how you're running your one-on-ones with your CFO, and how aggressive you've been with them, and maybe some distortions, how you might run role play that conversation. And oh, by the way, now we're going to talk about financing, because that also intersects. Right, so it's like coaching, and we're not diagnosing, and we're helping. They're driving the process, which is how coaching is different than advising.
Right.
Because advisors just kind of talk at you and give advice, and coaches like, we do give advice, but we help pull the answers out of them, because there's a lot of research that shows somebody struggling with their own issue, their behavioral change and their solution is going to be stickier. It's how adults learn, right? It's like there's something about that, and so coaching really is about present moment, helping somebody execute their role. Like, really what coaching is about is it's like kind of an ancient art form. I mean, it's existed, the dawn of time, the shaman or the priest or the helper, that kind of village. It's like, so we're just trying to help people figure out what they want to do and how they can move forward in a role. Because I think in therapy, you're just there as a human, which is great. And in coaching, you're trying to have impact, like you're trying to help the person perform, but it's not like a sports coach where you're like pushing and yelling at them and giving programs. I do give people homework and instructions, but so that's where coaching is, I actually think there's a better term for it, but it's kind of ubiquitous at this point, so it is what it is.
Right.
But that's the difference. You got heavy clinical psychologists, somewhat clinical, diagnostic, but personal life therapy. Coaching is interdisciplinary, very wide, does a little past and future, but is really centered in the present moment. And coaches, it's kind of unregulated at this point, so you got to kind of kick the tires a little bit and know who they are. I can do really deep stuff, but I've been trained in it. Not everybody can. Right. Different coaches have different backgrounds, and so you got to kind of suss it out a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because I also like to say, like, the best word for what I do is coaching. And I coach teams. I don't coach individuals. And my job, and I like what you said too, is to move teams forward. And that's what our logo is 3 chevrons, and it represents moving forward. If you're driving down a road and there's construction, you'll see that blinking 3 chevrons. They go this way, right? But it's also, they're in a line and they're different colors because it's diversity and it's in alignment and all that going on with it too. But I feel like when I think of coaching, and I coach sports as well, and I'm not the yelling, telling someone what to do coach either. Mine's really trying to understand how to unlock them. And my simple, like, kind of what I'm hanging on, like a theme lately, is like coaching, having a coach allows you to go farther than you would alone. And I think that's kind of the role of the coach. And I don't know if there's a better way to say it, and there's probably 50 different ways to say it. But that's what I see, like, I do and our coaches do, is really like, how do we unlock this team to work better together? And I think part of the process is, there's a lot of stuff that we don't do that you guys do that's needed. It's a lot of different types of individuals, right? But curious, like, your thoughts on one of the main things that we do that really helps teams. The thing that gets in the way of them is the things that they're not willing to talk about. It's challenged them. We use this analogy of hiking. They're carrying it up the hill. It's weighing them down. They don't want to talk about it. But being in the spot myself and being a founder multiple times, I know those are the things that slow teams down, impedes progress. So we try to uncover them in a transparent and comfortable atmosphere. But I'm sure you know more than I do. Individually, when there's not trust or there's something holding them back, there's things that people don't want to share.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, I'm guessing you've had situations where you talk about this stuff.
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is a great book.
It's a great book. I love Lencioni.
Yeah, and it's like easy to read, and it's fast, and it's not dry. It's like, it's really great to just, and everybody, like, it's table stakes just for like being a manager or like
100%.
running a team, you know? And yeah, I think, you know, we will do offsites, and the way we will structure them is kind of our underlying philosophy is integral theory. And like when I'm coaching somebody, or even when I'm designing an offsite or a workshop, I think about I, we, and it. And it's like, you know, if you're I'm going to back into your question, but I think this is, it's relevant. It's like, you know, it is technical, process, systemic, we is relational, I is individual.
Right.
If you look at somebody building a product, most of the time they're focused on the system, the product itself, the processes. The issue is that is then coordinated by a web of people, right? That all organizations are is just a group of people coordinating, well or not. And so, you know, if you're going to then intervene and make the product better, a lot of times you need to look at, and we all know the trade-offs that happen between marketing and product and engineering and how they gunk up, and then not only is that network of people collaborating, but that network is a bunch of individuals that are clear or not, skilled or not, etc. And so when people are like, where do you intervene? The answer is everywhere. Like, we tend to nudge people into the we at the relational and team level and the I, coaching and leadership development, because humans ignore it because it's uncomfortable, and we hate self-reflection because it's painful. And so, but people live in the it, and I think a good coach will acknowledge that. Coaches get into trouble just trying to do deep work or trying to be therapists, and it's like, you really need to understand, if you're coaching out a product, what their life is like, where the tensions are, like, you know, what the common, you know, organizational structures are, what good product looks like, all of that, right? And so, okay, and so to answer your question, I think like in the 5 Dysfunctions, they have a field book. I don't know if you checked that out. Have you seen that one? Yeah, there's great exercises in there, right? And like one of them is where everybody sits on a hot seat, and then you give feedback, ways you hold the team back, ways you move the team forward. If somebody journals for them, you go around, you got to warm things up a little bit and teach. It's super powerful. There's another one we do that people kind of like dread and joke about called knee to knee, where you write everybody down in a notebook and you take like a half a page and you go, things would be better between us if you would, and then if I would, and then you speed date. You get like a lawn or like a room across an afternoon, you go knee to knee with each member of the team and read what you wrote. And it's great. People hate it. It's very intense, but at the end it's very cathartic because they end up saying things. And the metaphor that you said is great too. Like another one that's similar is, it's like relationships and teams when they're flowing are like rivers, and these little rocks get dropped in, and it's like, oh, that was a sarcastic comment, oh, you ignored me, oh, you stepped on my toes, and that kind of builds up and the water starts to. And so you want to go in there, you don't want to like dredge the thing with dynamite, you're going to ruin the ecosystem. You want to go in there with thoughtfulness and intent and care and be like, yo, here's this thing between us, let's look at it and gingerly take it out, so the water isn't working so hard to, because the workaround, right, you ignore that person and all of a sudden the water just starts flowing again. And that's what people don't realize, like velocity in building a business is a lot of trapped energy in relationships. And sitting on the truth that you want to speak. But at the eye level, you gotta be careful, because a lot of times the truth you want to speak is your stuff. It's a distortion, it's your anxiety, it's your sense of inadequacy and control. You want what that person has, your empire building and like in some turf thing. So like, before I go on a team and I'm like, I need to give that person feedback, or my co-founder, I gotta check myself and say, how is this about me? Right? And once I've done that, then I have kind of clean hands in the operating room, and I can kind of go in there and be like, here's my piece in this. Right. And here's something that I need to say to you. And then in the middle, you kind of meet and rebuild that kind of partnership. Yeah. But boy, it is like, that is one of the most fundamental things for co-founders or teams to do, is ritualize like twice a year. And it's not clinical. It doesn't need to be like speaking the truth to each other. Just raw truth. You don't need to be sophisticated. You don't need an MBA to do that.
Right.
You know, you need some safety, and that's why it helps to have a facilitator.
Right.
To keep it on the rails. By the way, I did an offsite lunch. The guy got introduced, went to Stanford GSB, which is a great, business school, obviously talent farm, and I knew his friend from DaVita, and she's like, hey, my friend started a rap label, great business guy. Well, it was like one business guy and a bunch of rappers that he was building, right? And then some known ones. And so we go to this house in Simi Valley that probably was used for adult filming. And I was like, they were all so high. I was is this gonna work? Because I was gonna run the team playbook. We were gonna do knee to knee. We were gonna do deep exercises. We're gonna do lifelines and talk about how they work together and stuff. And I was like, and there was almost fist fights. And these guys had never been in a company and organization before, but it still worked.
Wow.
It still worked. I was like, sometimes they would like lose track of what they were saying because they were so high.
Yeah, but I've been in these moments, not that type of situation, but I've been in some moments where I'm like, do I need to call an audible here? Like, I don't know if they're going to embrace what I'm going to do.
Right.
Sometimes you get the craziest opposite reaction from them.
Yeah.
And doing that, I've had CEOs say, hey, why don't we gather around here and just hold hands for a second? Yeah. Wasn't a prayer, but it was definitely something like that. Mm-hmm. And I looked around the room, someone were kind of looked shocked. And I like to do this thing called Best and Thanks. And I teach all my teams to do this on a weekly cadence on their weekly meeting. Is we go around the room, it's real brief, best thing that happened to you in business or personal in the last week, and someone you'd like to thank. Yeah. And one, it connects them all, and it's a ritual, it's a habit, but it also really sets the floor for we're in this together, gratitude, positivity, and it just resets the room all the time. And I've done that and built that, and there's other things that I've built into the system, but the coaching for me, which is unique and different, is if you already could unlock them. If I work with teams that are working with coaches, and these teams have built the trust that they need, it is easier for me. My kind of at the highest level, what I do is I help them define these focal points of the mission. Do we agree on what that is? Maybe it needs to be changed. Maybe it needs some light adjustment. Are we kind of there? 3 years, where do we want to be? Do we have a picture of that? 1 year, let's get real clear what that is. In each functional area of the business, I like, when you talk 360, I do that within defining objectives within each of the functional areas of the business, with them together, with feedback from the teams below. And then we dial in either 90 or 180 days with what are the top objectives for our team, the leadership team, and then how are we going to accomplish that, which I call key results, key drivers to that. Cool. But it's all about driving towards getting them to figure out what's most important. Yeah. I don't tell them, sounds like you guys, I don't tell them what to do, how to do it, but I run the process, and I need them to lean into the process, and part of that's the unpacking part, and I'm curious to your thoughts on this. What I think is really important is that they do some work ahead of time into any session. They don't just come in and do this off the cuff, and that unpacking is them thinking about these things ahead of time, but also we do a survey, ask them questions, basically what's working, what's not working, right? The what's not working, again, I kind of keep on coming back to this, is I think that's our opportunity to grow and build. How do you kind of apply that initial 360 throughout the year and coming back to that and building on that? What's that look like? Yeah, well, I'll answer that. Just curious, do you think that level, what level of company, what size company does that structure work for? Is there a specific size? That's a good question. It's interesting. So how we built the systems, a team system. So once you hit Series A and you're above 25 employees and you're not one team anymore, what tends to happen is the CEO kind of goes through this realization is that what's holding everything together is them. They are the process, and they don't have a process. Right. And this even happens with a lot of the teams that we work with are multi-time founders, but they'll go through it again where they're I can handle this when it's like basically one team, but once we get above 20, now I have a team of teams, I can't do this anymore. And so the cycle of every department in startups, all they're doing is a scientific method, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Let's double down on the things that work. We're trying to do these experiments. And the CEO tends to be the one kind of holding these experiments and the communication loop, right? So once they get above that 25, that's where it gets interesting. And so most of our clients are between 25 and about 500 employees. And why that is because it's a team-to-team system. So we can do this at the leadership team level. As they grow, we can transcend it down into every team. But then we also have companies that are larger, and we can go into just individual into a team and implement Peak. We can implement Peak within a social media group, team within Google. Again, they need to align where they're going, what they need to do, how they're going to do it. And then they need the cadence of revision, unpacking, packing back up, and doing it again to move forward. So, but it's at the team level, which I think is important. You can't just communicate this across the organization and 5 people do the work. Each team then does the work. So give you a little bit better idea is typically OKRs cascade down beautifully, and that's just not the reality. And you talk to any group that uses them, it doesn't work. We build OKRs, and we do this work at the leadership team level, but then let's say the head of product, head of tech engineering, head of sales, they'll do that work with their team as well. And so they'll define what are the top 3 to 5 objectives and key results as well. So again, it's a team approach. When you cascade down like objectives, or it just only hits certain areas, and people say, well, what about us? And if you have functional areas, they all should be functional, meaning that they all should be doing something. Otherwise, so each team needs to be focused. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you did. I just it's a curious thing for me around what level of structure is important for what size company. And I think that there's a point where, it's confronting. It's interesting to hear you go through it again and again. You think with repeat founders, I think I agree with that. This transition point from I'm building a thing to I'm running an organization of people building the thing, and the running of the organization, which is basically leading people. You need systems and skills to be able to do that. And there's a sweet spot where the problem with a lot of startups too, when they kind of hit that phase, is they overbuild. And especially people from big companies, we would fight, we used to joke, we'd fight Google all over Silicon Valley, because these people would come in, from Google, and they would it'd be some 75-person company, and they'd want to build all this stuff.
Person never works.
It never works, and it's culturally inappropriate, because what worked at Google, it's even though there's some best practices, but it is really important. And that journey for a founder to go from product builder to leader is so hard and dysregulating. The dopamine hits are different. Your sense of value around, you're not actually building anything, it feels fuzzy and soft. And many don't ever make it. I mean, the transition, that's where, we joke, Mark Zuckerberg going from hoodie guy to whatever he wears now. We used to say suit.
White t-shirts and gold chains.
Yeah, that. But that there is that, and actually he's kind of a bad example, to be honest. I think he's kind of not a good leader. And up too hot again.
Here, let's do this.
It is warm.
Here, throw this on there. Just throw it over for a second. We'll stop this.
Put it over the And actually, the best founders at that stage really start to have a sense of craftsmanship that they normally would only apply to the product. That obsessive thoughtfulness to the org. The best ones actually think about that, because the danger is you just think robotically, or worse, you punt it to somebody in HR or whatever and say, you do it. You figure out how we're doing goals. You figure out what our management processes are. You really got to own that. And if you don't, as a leader, put somebody else in the job and become a floating co-founder or whatever.
Oh, we need to talk about the floating co-founder.
I know. That's kind of what's happening to me. I know I'm causing trouble. And
I have a really opinion on that, and I deal with a lot of co-founder conflict.
Yeah, me too.
I wrote about it in Peak Teams. I think it's really important that you play, as a founder, you play a role in the organization.
Yeah.
That might be CEO, that may be maybe and I lived this with a company I was in early, late 90s, is, your CTO turns into an R&D guy in the corner doing some really creative stuff, right? But I do think founder is not a role, it's a title.
Yeah.
And I think when we think about roles and responsibilities, everybody should have a role and responsibility. And
Totally.
I think, like, frankly, if you're a founder, you don't have a role and responsibility, you're now just an investor. You have equity.
Well,
and it can cause a lot of problems. What do you call it? The floating founder?
Floating co-founder.
That can cause a lot of problems. And you do have equity in the company, and maybe you should be on the board.
Yeah.
But I think you have to define your roles and responsibilities. Otherwise, it's going to be really challenging for people to execute.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because, like, number one, I mean, I think we both agree, like, early stage companies, co-founder dysfunction, misalignment, lack of clarity is, like, one of the biggest things that tanks early stage companies.
Right.
And, you know, talk about speaking the truth, like, doing the couples counseling with co-founders is, like, really critical work, and we do a lot of that. And I think it's okay, this is an opinion, you may not agree with that, in early stage to not really have clear titles, because you're birthing something into the world and everybody's in like one Slack channel, rowing in the same direction, doing the same thing. You know, you do want to have defined, like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. You want to have defined ownership.
Which is roles.
Right, roles. Yeah, so you don't necessarily, titles I think are important.
Titles are not as important, but roles are very important.
Yeah. So I agree with that because floating co-founders can cause a lot of havoc because they have a lot of authority and influence, I should say.
Yes.
And so I do think that eventually you got to get clear on what that is. And it's hard, right? I you know, because especially in the early days, there's a sense of equality, even with a lot of times with the CEO.
Yes.
And there's this moment where the CEO needs to kind of become the CEO, and then the other co-founders, if there's multiple, need to kind of understand that, and that resetting of that dynamic is really fraught. You have to be really delicate with that.
Yes.
Sometimes a co-founder leaves, as you know. And So, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I started all my companies with a co-founder. My first company that I built and sold, I sold to my co-founder.
Yeah.
Collective Genius. I want to get deep. My co-founder and I had a bad split up. I feel like I could have probably done a better job of maybe taking some of those pebbles out. I had a message in my head that was like, nope, we're done. Let's make a decision, yes or no, who's doing what. Real sad, years later, he committed suicide.
Oh, man.
You know?
Sorry.
And together we built something called Collective Genius. Andrew and I both came up with a word. I came up with collective, he came up with genius. You know, you do your quick Google search. Someone already owned collectivegenius.com. We did the hyphen, took it, trademarked it, and built the company. But we struggled to have that vision, that long-term vision and the short-term vision, and it just didn't work out. What do you think is really important to talk about that you don't think is talked about enough? Working with the type of companies that you work with.
I think it is the conversation around the level of craftsmanship around organization building needs to be talked about way earlier, and the amount of time that needs to get spent. And it doesn't mean time like you're like drilling in and grinding out organizational structures, but it takes time and thoughtfulness to be able to be intentional around building systems to like sustain your growth and to, you know, replicate a culture that was really unique so you don't lose it as you grow. And I think that like organizations are where people spend most of their waking hours, and it's a moral tragedy that they're sterile environments. And I think that I reject, and I would kind of, you know, say this with some degree of I'm trying to, you know, poke the bear a bit. Like, I think like your role when you're starting a business is both to birth a product that will add value into the world, you know, and create value, which includes financial, sure, that's integrated there too, but there's also like other stakeholders that you have, like the planet, communities, and then what I'm focusing on are your employees.
Yeah.
And the places that are truly, the businesses that are really great, right? If we think about the ones that are like world-changing and iconic, and they don't necessarily need to be huge, are the ones that people are like, working there changed my life. You know, a lot of people have those alumni stories of working, and they tend to be transient, and it relates to a leader that is really visionary, because then when that leader leaves, the organization starts to change. They inordinately invest in development, the way they work, and it's really rich, and people like, it's deeply fulfilling. They have a lot of fun. They learn, and then those places become talent supernovas, like I mentioned Yahoo, that then explode and seed all of these leaders that start companies. DaVita, like a generation of health tech founders came from that era of DaVita.
Yeah.
Most of the most iconic health, they came because it was one of the top tier healthcare talent. And so I just think and you don't have to wait till later stage. People are like, oh, I'll do that when I'm 1,000 people. Like, create a culturally rich environment, which is not foosball tables and food and parties, where like there's a sense of purposefulness and tribe that you're building internally. Because it's like, what is life for, right? It's like so short. We're not going to go around again. People act they're going to live forever. They ignore kind of the rich meaning questions, and they just kind of want to like spin this thing up. It's very like unidirectional.
Yeah.
And so that's my philosophical soapbox on that.
Well,
so.
I think it's so true though, and I say this a lot, is like there's just a lot of low hanging fruit that's actually not a lot of work.
Yeah. It's not
a lot of work.
Or expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, it may actually cost you nothing.
Yeah.
And it may be fun.
Yeah.
A lot of the teams for me when I start working with them is just a lot of low hanging fruit that we can do. That's
even just changing the conversation that you're in.
Yeah, just changing the conversation.
Like focusing on talking about different things. You're running your one-on-ones differently, asking different questions in your one-on-ones.
Right.
Making space for like meaning and people, the gratitude practice, that you were talking about, like gratitude is like a really powerful practice for humans. Variety of reasons.
Right.
12-step and recovery uses it a lot because it allows them to like, if you're grateful for something, you're acknowledging that you're not the center of the universe. You've been given something that has a sense of grace to it, and it opens your heart. It like shifts you out of feeling, angry at the left side of your brain. It makes people feel connected. Even just stuff like that, where people feel deeply connected and they feel like because everybody wants to just go to work and feel like they're adding value and contributing. They go home, they're like, I did something that mattered today.
Right.
It's simple. And if you can let them do that and then tell them that they did, you're going to change their life. Which is why, probably you too, it drives me so crazy with like bad managers, because it's not hard. I mean, you got to get out of your own way and go get coaching and therapy, because many of them are so like distorted and locked up in their own stuff that they're not able to just show up in that simple way.
Right.
So
I think everybody like should really focus on being a leader, not a manager.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think actually both are important, right? Because I think what probably management is implied, you know how to run a meeting, you know how to track a goal, you know how to, so maybe that's like where you're just kind of, you're combining them both. But I think like management skills you need to know how to like run the operations and structure. And then leadership is the behaviors, the intangibles, the motivation, storytelling, vision, emotional intelligence. Anyway, so a lot of times
you could break it up. You could break it up.
A lot of times we do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I generally agree with you. If I was going to have either, I think humans need to learn about leadership the most.
I think everybody needs to learn how to lead.
Mm-hmm.
They can't wait for. I mean, especially in kind of the companies that I tend to work with. Like I say the 5 behaviors of high performing teams. I don't care what team you talk about. Is symbiosis. They're leaning in. They want to work together, and they want to figure out how to work together. I think that's super important. Communication super important. That's around like cadences. I think defining alignment and clarity around that super important. I think learning, and I think empowerment. And if you can embrace those and find a method to those, and that's kind of my basis for our methodology, is creating a cadence of tools to build on those behaviors and creating that a habit. I think that's the way to success.
Yeah, those are great principles. Those are great. That sense of autonomy and learning, and like feeling like you show up every day, you're moving forward, you're growing, but you're also like building. It's like, again, if you're able to structure those in, you're gonna create a place that is really special. And you just got to be intentional about it. Again, it's like you don't have to throw money at it. You actually do have to throw money at it at later stages, by the way. Like the best companies spend millions of dollars on development and culture. However, for a lot of the people that probably are, they're entrepreneurs listening to podcasts, even at the earlier stages, it costs nothing. So, anyway.
All right, I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
And this is part 1, because you and I have to do this ridiculous.
Yeah.
I feel like we just started talking.
Yeah. I know.
But I have to ask you this one last question. This is a good one for you.
Okay.
It's more of a scenario. It's really important. I'm going to parallel park. I'm going to do a 3-point turn here.
Yeah.
Why ask you this question? So the scenario is this. You're trapped on a desert island the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You have food, you have water, you have healthcare, maybe some of the other things that you enjoy, and I don't know what they are, but you have them. The one thing you don't have is entertainment. There's no entertainment on this island. You're on the island the rest of your life. However, lucky for you, a old 80s boombox drifts ashore. It's unlimited batteries. So now you're set. But you can only bring one album of any genre, era, but you only one album to listen to the rest of your life.
Assuming they still make tapes to put in the 80s.
Yeah. You can put, Good point. Yeah.
Okay.
Good point.
Keep going.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
So you get to choose one album.
Yeah.
It could exist on CD or digital or whatever. Any era.
Yeah.
One album to listen to the rest of your life. What's it going to be?
Pearl Jam Yield. Yeah.
Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
When did that album come out?
1998.
Okay.
Yeah. January, February.
Wow. Interesting choice.
Yeah.
Okay, now I hear, and I was gonna say, like, I was listening to your music today. Second time I put it on, I wanted to say I heard a little grunge in there.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's a bad word anymore for some people. I mean, you definitely got like the pop, punk, rock.
Yeah, that first song especially. Yeah.
Then I thought once we got to Hole.
God Size Hole. Yeah.
God Size Hole.
Queens of the Stone Age, kind of. Yeah.
And I thought, like Stone Temple Pilots.
Yeah.
I felt like Scott Weiland all of a sudden came and sat in the car with me on that track.
Yeah.
That track is, I mean, that's a really good song.
Yeah, I know.
I've only listened to it twice.
Proud of that one. Yeah, I know. That's probably one of my favorites. Yeah. Look, yeah, the reason for Yield, I'm a big Pearl Jam fan, but I also like lots of indie rock too, is like that album feels like a concept album, and there's like this, all the songs fit together in a journey, and it doesn't necessarily, Given to Flies on it, but it doesn't have a, like, their most famous stuff is their 5th album, and it's just like the sense of you're driving and you can just see the horizon in the distance, and there's a sense of possibility and transcendence to it. And it just feels like almost like you're listening to a soundtrack. It's their most coherent album, and it's one of their most different albums from that standpoint. And Eddie wrote a lot of it based on that book Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, which is a book about like how humans relate to the earth and like anthropomorphism and like creating an earth that is going to kind of continue. But it's just like, it just feels like you're like shooting off into the stars in that album, and it's like it's almost like not grungy, if because there's a lot of people that probably don't know that one,
right?
But it's like, man, if I have to listen to something and I want like a soundtrack for what I'm doing, because it just makes me, I just sit down and just kind of like my mind opens up and I just like get creative. So
that's awesome. That's a great answer.
Yeah.
I'm gonna listen to that.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to that album for a long time. I'm gonna re-listen to that album.
Totally.
All right, man. Thanks for joining me on the show.
Yeah.